Who? Daniel struggled to form the question, still staring at the faceless figure. What are they? Why are they involved with Storm? Liam listened for a moment to something only he could hear, then responded. They're Storm's guardian. They promised Caleb they would look after Storm if anything happened to him. He paused, his head tilted as if listening again. They say thank you for saving Storm. He would have died without us. Eleanor found her voice at last. If they're Storm's guardian, why leave him to freeze in the snow? Why not bring him to the cabin? Liam relayed the question and then nodded at the silent answer. They were looking for him everywhere. The storm made it hard to find him. When they finally felt him nearby, he was already at our house. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, clearly struggling to accept what was happening. So what now? Why show themselves to us? Why bring us here? Through Liam, the entity explained that they needed the family to understand what Storm had witnessed and why he might still be in danger. The dog had been present when his owner, Caleb Weston, was murdered by a man he had testified against in court. The killer knew Storm had seen everything and had tried to kill the dog too. Storm had barely escaped, running blindly through the brewing snowstorm until collapse brought him to the Carters' doorstep. They're afraid the bad man will come looking for Storm, Liam translated, his young face solemn with the weight of this knowledge. To make sure there are no witnesses left. Eleanor felt her blood run cold. Are you saying this murderer might come to our house, looking for the dog? Liam nodded, worry creasing his small forehead. They think he might. That's why they took Storm last night, to protect him, and us. But why bring him back to us now? Daniel asked, bewildered. If he's safer with them? Storm answered this question himself, moving away from the faceless guardian and returning to Liam's side, pressing his body against the boy's legs protectively. The message was clear. Storm had chosen them, had formed a bond that even his supernatural guardian recognized and respected. He wants to stay with us, Liam said, putting a hand on Storm's head, to keep us safe from the bad man. The faceless figure nodded once, a strangely human gesture from such an inhuman form. Then it reached into its coat and withdrew something small and metallic, which it held out toward them. Daniel hesitated, then slowly approached, reaching out to take the object. It was a military dog tag on a chain. He read the inscription aloud. Weston, Caleb A. U.S. Army. Proof, Eleanor whispered, understanding dawning. They're giving us proof that what they're saying is true. The figure nodded again, then pointed at Storm, making a gesture that somehow conveyed protection, vigilance. They're saying Storm will know if the bad man comes, Liam translated. He'll warn us, protect us. As if to confirm this, Storm straightened, his posture becoming more alert, more soldier-like. In that moment, Eleanor could see what the dog must have been before tragedy struck. A highly trained military companion, loyal and protective. The faceless guardian raised a hand in what seemed like farewell, then turned and walked back toward the cabin. At the threshold, it paused, looking back, or seeming to, despite the absence of eyes, at the Carter family and Storm. A final acknowledgement, perhaps, a passing of responsibility. Then it entered the cabin and closed the door behind it. For a long moment, the family stood in silence, Storm at their side, all of them staring at the weathered structure. Then, before their eyes, the cabin began to shimmer, its edges becoming less distinct, its form fading like morning mist in sunlight. Within seconds it was gone, leaving only an empty clearing with no sign it had ever existed. It's gone, Liam said unnecessarily, his voice filled with wonder rather than fear. They're gone. Eleanor moved to her son's side, placing a protective arm around his shoulders. Let's go home, she said quietly, still trying to process everything that had happened. We all need to talk about this. As they turned to leave the clearing, Storm stayed close to Liam, his body language alert and protective. Whatever else the German Shepherd might be, lost pet, witness to murder, linked to the supernatural, he was now undeniably theirs. Their guardian, their protector against a danger they had never anticipated when they first opened their door to a dying dog in a snowstorm. The journey back through the woods seemed shorter and less confusing than their earlier panicked search. Storm led the way, finding a clear path through the trees with unerring confidence. It was as if the forest itself had shifted, becoming less threatening now that Storm was with them. None of them spoke much during the walk home. There was too much to process, too many impossible things to reconcile with their understanding of the world. Liam alone seemed unfazed, one hand resting casually on Storm's back as they walked, as if supernatural guardians and telepathic communications were perfectly normal parts of childhood. Eleanor and Daniel exchanged frequent glances, their expressions mirroring each other's bewilderment and concern. They had so many questions, so many fears for what might lie ahead. But one thing was certain, their lives had changed irrevocably from the moment Storm entered them. As they emerged from the woods into their backyard, the normality of their home, the same house they had left just hours ago, seemed almost shocking in contrast to what they had experienced in the forest. How could the world look so ordinary when everything had changed so profoundly? Storm stopped at the edge of their yard, his ears perked forward, his body suddenly tense. A low growl rumbled in his throat as he stared at their house. Daniel immediately pushed Liam behind him, scanning the property for signs of threat. "What is it, boy? What do you see?" The German Shepherd continued to growl, his focus unwavering on the house. Eleanor felt fear grip her heart. Had the murderer already found them? Was he waiting inside their home? Storm barked once sharply, then darted forward toward the house, moving with the fluid grace of a predator. The family followed more cautiously, Daniel keeping Liam and Eleanor behind him as they approached their back door. It was slightly ajar. Eleanor was certain they had locked it when they left. Someone had been in their house. Someone might still be inside. "Did you notice any clues that would help the Carter family identify who might have broken into their home? Share your theories in the comments about who the murderer might be and how Storm will protect the family." Daniel held up a hand, signaling Eleanor and Liam to stay put. "Wait here," he whispered, his eyes never leaving the partially open door. "Daniel, no!" Eleanor hissed, gripping his arm. "If someone's in there, we need to call the police." But Storm had already slipped past them, his body low to the ground, moving silently toward the house with a focus and precision that reminded them of his military training. The transformation in the dog was remarkable. Gone was any trace of the weak, dying animal they had rescued. In his place was a highly trained guardian, every muscle taut with purpose. "Storm, wait!" Liam called in a loud whisper. But the German Shepherd ignored him, disappearing through the open door into the house. Daniel made a quick decision. "Stay here with Liam," he told Eleanor. "If you hear anything that sounds wrong, take him and run to the neighbors. Call 911. Before Eleanor could protest further, Daniel followed Storm into the house, moving as quietly as he could. The kitchen was empty, but immediately he sensed that something was off. Cabinet doors stood open that had been closed when they left. Drawers had been pulled out, their contents disturbed. Someone had been searching for something. He heard Storm's nails clicking on the hardwood floor in the living room and followed the sound, his heart pounding. The dog was standing in the center of the room, alert but not aggressive. His ears perked forward as he surveyed the space. The living room, like the kitchen, showed signs of having been searched. Cushions were askew, books had been pulled from shelves, and a desk drawer hung open, but there was no one there now. "Clear?" Daniel whispered to Storm, feeling slightly foolish for addressing the dog, as if he were a police partner, but also strangely confident that Storm understood. The German Shepherd looked at him, then moved toward the stairs, his posture still alert, but not alarmed. Daniel followed, checking rooms as they progressed through the house. Everywhere they went, there were signs that someone had been searching, methodically, thoroughly, but without vandalism or unnecessary destruction. This wasn't a random break-in. Whoever had been here was looking for something specific. By the time they reached the second floor, Daniel was certain the intruder was gone. All the rooms showed the same signs of having been searched, but there was no one hiding anywhere. Storm's behavior confirmed this. The dog was still alert, but no longer tense, as if the threat had passed. Daniel returned to the back door where Eleanor and Liam were waiting anxiously. "It's clear," he told them. "They're gone. But they definitely went through the house looking for something." The dog tags, Eleanor realized immediately. They must be looking for proof of what happened to Caleb. Daniel nodded grimly. "That would be my guess. Come on, let's go inside. We need to call the police." As they entered the kitchen, Liam gasped. "They made a mess. Why would they do that?" "They were looking for something, sweetie," Eleanor explained, trying to keep her voice calm despite her racing heart. "But they didn't find it because we had it with us." She turned to Daniel. "Where are the dog tags?" Daniel patted his pocket where he had placed the military identification. Right here, safe. Storm moved restlessly through the kitchen, sniffing at areas where the intruder had touched things. His behavior was methodical, almost forensic, as if he were cataloging the scent for future reference. He's memorizing the smell, Liam observed, watching the dog with fascination. So, he can recognize the bad man if he comes back. Daniel and Eleanor exchanged glances. The events of the morning, the faceless entity, the vanishing cabin, the telepathic communication, seemed surreal in the mundane setting of their disrupted home. But the evidence of the break-in was undeniable. Whatever supernatural elements might be at play, they were now faced with a very real, very human threat. "I'm calling the police," Daniel said, reaching for his phone. The local police arrived within 20 minutes. Officer Jenkins, a middle-aged man with a weathered face and skeptical eyes, listened to their account of the break-in with professional detachment. Daniel described discovering the open door and the signs of searching throughout the house, but deliberately omitted any mention of faceless entities or vanishing cabins. He simply explained that they had taken their dog for a walk in the woods and returned to find their home had been invaded. "And nothing was taken?" Officer Jenkins asked, jotting notes in a small pad. "No electronics, jewelry, cash?" "Not that we've noticed," Eleanor replied, having already checked her jewelry box and the emergency cash they kept in a drawer. "It really seems like they were just searching for something." The officer nodded, his expression non-committal. "We've had a few break-ins after the storm. People know some homes were evacuated. Opportunists." He looked around the kitchen. "Though usually they take things, not just rummage through." "Is there anything you can do?" Daniel asked. "Dust for fingerprints or—" Officer Jenkins gave a small, apologetic smile. "We can take prints, but unless this person is in the system, it won't help much. And with the storm aftermath, our resources are stretched pretty thin." He closed his notebook. "I'll file a report, have patrols pass by your house more frequently for a few days. In the meantime, make sure all your doors and windows are secured. Maybe consider a security system." As the officer was preparing to leave, his gaze fell on Storm, who had been watching the proceedings from a corner of the kitchen, his intelligent eyes never leaving the policeman. "That's an impressive dog," Officer Jenkins commented. "German Shepherd?" "Yes," Daniel confirmed. "We recently, adopted him." The officer nodded approvingly. "Good choice for security. These dogs are natural protectors, smart too. Probably better than any alarm system you could install." After the police left, the family set about restoring order to their home. Eleanor tried to maintain a sense of normalcy for Liam's sake, suggesting he help her tidy his room while Daniel worked on the main floor. But there was an undercurrent of tension that couldn't be dispelled. Someone had been in their home, invading their private space, and the violation left them all on edge. Storm stayed close to Liam throughout the cleanup, occasionally nudging the boy with his nose or leaning against his legs as if offering reassurance. The bond between them was growing stronger by the hour, transcending the usual relationship between child and pet. There was something almost supernatural about it, a connection forged in crisis and deepened by shared secrets. By late afternoon, the house was mostly back in order, though Eleanor doubted she would ever feel completely secure in it again. Daniel had checked and reinforced all the locks, even adding a few improvised security measures to the windows. But they all knew that if the intruder was determined enough, locks wouldn't be sufficient. Their only real security was Storm. As evening approached, Eleanor prepared dinner, trying to maintain their normal routine despite the extraordinary events of the day. Liam sat at the kitchen table, drawing pictures of Storm and the faceless guardian, while the German Shepherd lay at his feet, ever watchful. "Do you think the bad man will come back?" Liam asked suddenly, looking up from his drawing. The question hung in the air, giving voice to the fear they had all been avoiding. Eleanor paused in her cooking, searching for the right balance between honesty and reassurance. "I don't know, sweetie, but if he does, we're prepared now. We have Storm, and we'll be extra careful." Liam nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer. He returned to his drawing, adding details to the figure of Storm, making him look stronger and more heroic than he already was. Daniel, who had been making a list of additional security measures they might need, looked up at his son's question. His eyes met Eleanor's over Liam's head, a silent communication passing between them. They needed to know more about what they were facing. The dog tags were a start, but they needed concrete information about Caleb Weston, his testimony, and the man he had testified against. After dinner, with Liam occupied in the living room, Daniel and Eleanor sequestered themselves in the small home office. Daniel booted up his laptop, while Eleanor closed the door most of the way, leaving it cracked so they could hear if Liam needed them. "What exactly are we looking for?" Eleanor asked as Daniel typed Caleb Weston military into a search engine. "Anything that can verify what the entity told us," Daniel replied, still finding it difficult to speak naturally about their supernatural encounter. If Caleb Weston was real, if he testified against someone, and if that person might now be after Storm. The search results were immediate and sobering. Caleb Weston had indeed been a U.S. Army sergeant, a dog handler who had served 2 tours in Afghanistan with his canine partner. Further searching revealed news articles from just 2 weeks ago. Local military veteran found dead in apparent homicide. Daniel and Eleanor read in stunned silence. According to the articles, Caleb Weston, 34, had been found dead in his rural home outside Winterbrook. The cause of death was listed as multiple stab wounds. His service dog, a German shepherd named Shadow, was missing and presumed either taken or fled. "Shadow?" Eleanor whispered. "Not Storm." "Close enough," Daniel murmured, his eyes still scanning the article. Liam gave him a new name without knowing his real one. The most recent article mentioned that police were investigating potential connections to a case where Weston had testified as a key witness 6 months earlier. The defendant in that case, Victor Rawlins, had been convicted of supplying illegal weapons that were later used in a mass shooting. Weston's testimony had been crucial to the conviction, as he had witnessed a transaction while walking his dog near the abandoned quarry at the edge of town, and Victor Rawlins had been released from prison on a technicality just 3 days before Weston's murder. "This is it," Daniel said, his voice tight. "This is exactly what the entity told us through Liam. Storm, Shadow, witnessed his owner's murder, and the killer knows it." Eleanor felt a chill run through her. "But how would a dog's testimony matter? It's not like Storm can testify in court." "No," Daniel agreed. "But he might have seen something that could lead investigators to evidence. Or maybe Rawlins is just being thorough, eliminating anything connected to Weston." He ran a hand through his hair. "Either way, he was in our house today, looking for Shadow." "We should call the police again," Eleanor insisted. "Show them the dog tags. Tell them we have Shadow." Daniel looked uncertain. "And tell them what?" "That a faceless entity in a disappearing cabin told us the dog witnessed a murder? That it can communicate telepathically with our 5-year-old son?" Eleanor bit her lip. Put that way, it did sound ludicrous. The police would probably think they were suffering from carbon monoxide poisoning or some kind of shared delusion. "We can leave out the supernatural parts," she suggested. "Just say we found the dog during the storm and only realized who he belonged to when we discovered the dog tags while walking him." Daniel nodded slowly. "That might work, but it would mean letting the police take Shadow as evidence. Are you prepared for how Liam will react to that?" The question gave Eleanor pause. Their son had formed an intense attachment to the dog in just 2 days. Being separated from Shadow now would devastate him, but keeping the dog meant potentially putting their family in continuing danger. "Let's sleep on it," she decided finally. "Maybe there's a way to help the police without giving up Shadow, and we should probably start calling him by his real name." Daniel agreed, closing his laptop. The knowledge they had gained confirmed their fears, but also provided a framework for understanding what they were facing. The threat was real, specific, and directed not at them, but at the dog they had taken in. In a way, that was both reassuring and terrifying. They returned to the living room to find Liam asleep on the couch, one arm draped over Shadow, who lay on the floor beside him, alert despite the late hour. The dog's eyes tracked them as they entered, intelligent and watchful. "Should we wake him for bed?" Daniel whispered, gesturing to their sleeping son. Eleanor shook her head. "Let him sleep. After everything today, he needs the rest." She glanced at Shadow. "And I think he feels safe with his guardian." They covered Liam with a blanket and settled into armchairs nearby, neither of them quite ready to go upstairs and leave their son alone, even with Shadow's protection. The dog seemed to approve of their decision, resting his head on his paws but keeping his eyes open, maintaining his vigilant watch. The night passed without incident. Eleanor and Daniel took turns dozing in the armchairs, never leaving Liam and Shadow unattended. By morning, the immediate fear from the break-in had receded somewhat, replaced by a more measured concern and determination to protect their family. Over breakfast, they explained to Liam that the dog's real name was Shadow, gently correcting him when he automatically called the German Shepherd Storm. Liam accepted this new information with the adaptability of childhood, quickly switching to the dog's true name. "Shadow is even better than Storm," he declared, stroking the dog's fur as he ate his cereal. "Because he was hiding in the shadows when we found him, and now he's coming back into the light." The poetic observation caught Eleanor and Daniel by surprise. Their son had always been sensitive and articulate for his age, but sometimes his insights seemed to go beyond normal childhood perception. "That's a beautiful way to think about it," Eleanor said, smiling at her son. "Shadow is lucky to have found you." "I think we found each other," Liam replied with simple certainty, "because we both needed someone." After breakfast, Daniel contacted the local veterinary clinic, explaining that they had found a stray German Shepherd during the storm. He made an appointment for that afternoon, wanting to ensure that Shadow was truly recovering from his ordeal and to check if he had a microchip that might confirm his identity. While Daniel was on the phone, Eleanor noticed Shadow grow suddenly alert, his ears perking up as he stared at the front window. A low growl rumbled in his chest. "What is it, boy?" she asked, moving to the window to peer out. A car she didn't recognize was driving slowly past their house. Just as it came into full view, Shadow's growl intensified. "Daniel," she called, her voice tight. "Someone's outside." Daniel joined her at the window, phone still in hand. The car was an older model sedan, dark blue, with tinted windows that made it impossible to see the driver clearly. It moved past their house at a crawl, too slow for someone simply driving through the neighborhood. "They're watching the house," Daniel said quietly. "Probably checking if we're home." "The bad man?" Liam asked, his small face suddenly fearful as he too joined them at the window. The car continued down the street and disappeared around a corner. Shadow's growl subsided, but he remained alert, his body tense and ready. "I think we should all go to the vet appointment," Daniel decided. "I don't want anyone staying here alone right now." Eleanor nodded her agreement. The thought of being alone in the house or being separated from any member of their family was deeply unsettling after everything that had happened. They prepared for the outing with unusual care, making sure doors and windows were securely locked. Daniel even set up his laptop to record through its webcam, positioning it to capture anyone who might enter through the front door. It wasn't a sophisticated security system, but it was better than nothing. The drive to the veterinary clinic was tense, all of them watching for the dark blue sedan. Shadow sat in the back seat beside Liam, his posture military straight, eyes scanning the road ahead and the passing vehicles with focused attention. The veterinarian, Dr. Reyes, was a warm, competent woman in her 40s who immediately put them at ease. She examined Shadow thoroughly, noting the signs of recent malnutrition and exposure, but expressing optimism about his recovery. "He's in remarkably good shape considering what you've described," she told them, running her hands expertly over Shadow's body. "German Shepherds are resilient, but he's bounced back faster than I would have expected." When she checked for a microchip, the scanner beeped affirmatively. Dr. Reyes looked at the information on her screen, her expression changing to one of surprise. "This is interesting," she said. "According to the chip, this dog's name is Shadow, and he belonged to a Caleb Weston." She looked up at them. "That name sounds familiar. Wasn't there a news story recently?" Daniel nodded, deciding it was time for a version of the truth. "Yes. We think this might be the missing service dog that belonged to the veteran who was killed 2 weeks ago." Dr. Reyes's eyes widened. "You should contact the police immediately. This could be important evidence in their investigation." "We plan to," Eleanor assured her. "We just wanted to make sure Shadow was healthy first." The veterinarian continued her examination, pointing out several interesting findings. "He's definitely received military or police training," she noted, as she observed Shadow's responses to certain commands and gestures. "See how he positions himself? Always between your son and the door, always alert. That's not just good breeding, that's extensive training." She also noticed several scars beneath Shadow's fur that predated his recent ordeal. "These look like combat injuries," she explained, consistent with a service dog who's been deployed overseas. Most concerning were the more recent wounds, a deep cut on his shoulder that had begun to heal, and defensive wounds on his front legs. "These are about 2 weeks old," Dr. Reyes said gravely, consistent with the timeline of his owner's death. "He tried to protect him," Liam said softly, stroking Shadow's head. "Didn't you, boy? You tried to save Caleb." Shadow whined softly, leaning into Liam's touch. The connection between them was palpable, a bond of trust and protection that transcended the usual relationship between child and pet. Before they left, Dr. Reyes provided them with proper dog food, medications to ensure Shadow's continued recovery, and her card with her personal cell phone number. "Call me anytime if you have concerns," she told them, "and please contact the police soon. If this is indeed Caleb Weston's dog, they need to know." She hesitated, then added in a lower voice, "I read that they suspected foul play in Weston's death. Please be careful." The warning wasn't necessary. The Carter family was already on high alert, aware that they were involved in something dangerous and complex that went beyond their understanding of the normal world. As they drove home, Daniel brought up the question they had been avoiding. "We need to decide about contacting the police," he said. "Dr. Reyes is right. If Shadow witnessed Weston's murder, he could be crucial to the investigation." "But they might take him away," Liam protested immediately from the back seat, his arm protectively around Shadow. "They might put him in a cage or something." "They wouldn't do that, sweetie," Eleanor assured him, though she wasn't entirely confident. "They would want to take good care of him because he's important." "But he needs to stay with us," Liam insisted, his voice rising with emotion. "He picked us, and we need him to keep us safe from the bad man." Daniel and Eleanor exchanged glances. Their son's attachment to Shadow was intense, perhaps unnaturally so, given the short time they had known each other. But after their encounter with the faceless guardian and the evidence of Shadow's protective behavior, they couldn't dismiss the possibility that there was indeed a special bond between Liam and the dog, something that went beyond ordinary explanation. "What if we talk to the police but ask to keep Shadow with us?" Daniel suggested. "We can explain that he's bonded with Liam and offer to cooperate fully with their investigation while maintaining custody of him." This compromise seemed to satisfy Liam, though he remained anxious about any interaction with authorities that might separate him from Shadow. For his part, the German Shepherd seemed equally determined to stay with Liam, his protective behavior becoming more pronounced whenever the boy moved more than a few feet away from him. They were approaching their neighborhood when Eleanor noticed Shadow suddenly become alert in the back seat, his ears forward, body tense. Following his gaze, she spotted the dark blue sedan parked about a block from their house. "Daniel," she said quietly, trying not to alarm Liam, "that car is back." Daniel slowed their vehicle, carefully observing the sedan. The windows were still tinted, making it impossible to see the driver. But there was no doubt it was the same car that had cruised past their house earlier. "What should we do?" Eleanor whispered. "Drive past our house? Go to the police station directly?" Daniel considered their options. Driving past might alert the watcher that they had spotted him, potentially escalating the situation. Going to the police station made sense, but what would they say? That they were being watched by someone they suspected might be a murderer, based on information from a supernatural entity? "We're going home," he decided finally. "But we're going to call the police as soon as we get inside. No more delays, no more discussions. Shadow is evidence in a murder case, and someone is stalking our house. That's enough for the police to take seriously." Eleanor nodded her agreement, though anxiety knotted her stomach. As they approached their house, the dark blue sedan remained where it was, stationary but menacing. Daniel pulled into their driveway and quickly ushered his family inside, Shadow staying close to Liam as they hurried from the car to the front door. Once inside, with doors locked and curtains drawn, Daniel reached for the phone to call the police. But before he could dial, Shadow's behavior changed dramatically. The German Shepherd moved to the front door, his body rigid, a deep growl emanating from his chest. His hackles were raised, teeth bared in a silent snarl. Someone was at the door. The family froze, watching as the doorknob turned slowly, testing if it was locked. Finding it secure, whoever was outside paused. Then came a knock, casual and unthreatening, as if it were just a neighbor stopping by. Daniel moved Liam and Eleanor back, positioning himself between them and the door. Shadow remained where he was, a living barrier, his growl continuous now, a warning to whoever stood on the other side. "Who is it?" Daniel called, trying to keep his voice neutral despite his racing heart. A pause, then a male voice, pleasant and unthreatening. "Sorry to bother you. My car broke down just up the street. Could I use your phone to call for help?" The request was ordinary, the kind of thing that happened in neighborhoods all the time, but Shadow's reaction told them this was no stranded motorist. The German Shepherd's growl had intensified, his body language communicating absolute certainty of threat. "There's a service station around the corner," Daniel responded, maintaining the pretense of normalcy. "About 2 blocks down. They should be able to help you." Another pause. When the voice came again, it had lost some of its friendly affect. "Actually, I'm looking for something that belongs to me. I think you might have found it during the storm." Eleanor felt a chill run through her. The man wasn't even trying to hide his purpose now. She moved closer to Liam, pulling him against her protectively. Shadow backed up to stand directly in front of them, never taking his focus off the door. "We didn't find anything during the storm," Daniel called back, his own pretense dropping. "You should leave now, or I'm calling the police." A soft laugh from the other side of the door. "I don't think you want to do that. You don't want to get involved in this. Just give me the dog and I'll disappear. No one needs to get hurt." The threat was implicit but clear. Liam clung to his mother, his eyes wide with fear. Shadow's growl had become a continuous rumble, like distant thunder promising a violent storm. "The police are already on their way," Daniel lied, slowly reaching for his cell phone. "They know about Caleb Weston. They know about Shadow." A sharp intake of breath from outside, then silence. For a moment, they thought the man might have left. Then, without warning, a tremendous crash shook the door as something, or someone, slammed against it. The lock held, but the wood around it splintered slightly. Another crash? The door frame cracked visibly this time. Shadow sprang into action, positioning himself directly in front of the weakening door, his body coiled and ready. The transformation in the dog was remarkable. No longer a pet or companion, but a trained military asset prepared to engage a threat. "Get upstairs!" Daniel shouted to Eleanor and Liam. "Lock yourselves in the bathroom. Use the phone up there to call 911. Eleanor didn't argue. She swept Liam into her arms and ran for the stairs, the sound of another crash against the door following them. Shadow remained in position, a last line of defense, while Daniel grabbed a heavy fireplace poker and stood ready beside the dog. As they reached the top of the stairs, Eleanor glanced back just in time to see the door finally give way, bursting inward with a sound of splintering wood. A figure lunged through the opening, a man in dark clothing, his face twisted with determination and something darker. In his hand was something that glinted in the light, a knife. Shadow launched himself at the intruder in a blur of motion, all controlled aggression and precise targeting. The man screamed as powerful jaws clamped onto his arm, forcing him to drop the knife. Daniel moved in with the poker, striking at the intruder's legs, trying to bring him down without getting too close. The last thing Eleanor saw before pulling Liam into the bathroom was Shadow and the intruder locked in a desperate struggle, with Daniel circling, looking for an opening to help the dog without risking injury to either of them. She slammed and locked the bathroom door, then reached for her phone with shaking hands. As she dialed 911, Liam broke free from her grasp and pressed his ear to the door, his small face intense with concentration. "Liam, get back!" Eleanor whispered urgently as the emergency operator answered. But Liam wasn't listening. His eyes had taken on that same distant look they had had in the forest when communicating with the faceless guardian. He placed his palm flat against the door, as if reaching for something on the other side. "Shadow," he whispered, "remember your training, remember Caleb." As Eleanor frantically explained their situation to the 911 operator, she couldn't help but wonder what was happening downstairs, and what strange connection was flowing between her son and the extraordinary dog who had entered their lives during a snowstorm, bringing with him mysteries both earthly and supernatural. The battle downstairs had only just begun. But for the Carters, the world would never be the same again. Can you predict what special ability Shadow might reveal in the final confrontation? Is it possible the faceless guardian might return to help in this moment of crisis? Tell us in the comments what you think will happen next. Downstairs, chaos erupted. The intruder, now identified as Victor Rawlins, fought with desperate ferocity against Shadow and Daniel. The German Shepherd's military training was evident in every move he made. precise, calculated attacks targeting Rollins' arm and leg, never giving the man an opportunity to regain his balance or retrieve his fallen knife. Daniel circled carefully, the poker gripped in both hands, looking for an opening. He was no fighter, but the need to protect his family gave him a courage he hadn't known he possessed. When Rollins momentarily broke free of Shadow's grip and lunged for the knife, Daniel swung the poker, catching the man across the shoulders and sending him sprawling. "You don't understand what you're involved in," Rollins spat, blood trickling from a bite wound on his arm. "That dog is evidence. He's a witness to you murdering Caleb Weston," Daniel responded, never lowering the poker. "We know what happened." Rollins' eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. "You know nothing. Give me the dog, and this ends. Your family stays safe. That's a fair deal." Shadow growled, a low, continuous sound that vibrated through the room. He positioned himself between Rollins and the stairs, physically blocking the path to Liam and Eleanor. "The police are on their way," Daniel said, hoping it was true. Eleanor must have reached 911 by now. "It's over, Rollins. You're not getting Shadow." A strange expression crossed the intruder's face, surprise perhaps at hearing the dog's name, then a smile, cold and unsettling. "So you do know more than you should. All the more reason why this has to end now." With unexpected speed, Rollins grabbed a heavy lamp from a nearby table and hurled it at Daniel. Daniel ducked, but the momentary distraction was all Rollins needed. He lunged forward, tackling Daniel to the ground, both men crashing into a coffee table that splintered beneath their weight. Shadow immediately attacked, clamping his jaws on Rollins' leg and pulling, trying to drag him off Daniel. The intruder howled in pain, but managed to land a solid punch to Daniel's jaw, momentarily stunning him. Rollins then kicked viciously at Shadow, catching the dog in the ribs and sending him sliding across the hardwood floor. Upstairs, Liam gasped, his hand still pressed against the bathroom door. "Shadow's hurt," he whispered, his eyes unfocused. "Daddy's in trouble." Eleanor had just finished giving their address to the 911 operator, who had promised police were being dispatched immediately. She pulled Liam away from the door. "Help is coming, sweetie. We need to stay here where it's safe." But Liam's expression had changed. The distant look in his eyes had been replaced by something else, a determination that looked out of place on his 5-year-old face. "Shadow needs help," he said simply. "He needs to remember." Before Eleanor could stop him, Liam pressed both palms flat against the door and closed his eyes. His lips moved silently, as if in prayer or invocation. Eleanor reached for him, intending to pull him back, when a strange sensation swept through the small bathroom, a drop in temperature, a pressure change, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. "Liam," Eleanor whispered, suddenly afraid, not of what was happening downstairs, but of whatever her son was doing or connecting with. Liam opened his eyes, and for an instant, Eleanor thought they looked different, older somehow, wiser, with a depth no child's eyes should possess. Then he blinked, and he was just her little boy again, looking up at her with a small, reassuring smile. "It's okay, Mommy," he said. "Help is coming." Downstairs, the fight had turned dire. Daniel was on his feet again, but bleeding from a cut above his eye where he'd struck the edge of the broken table. Rollins had retrieved his knife and was circling, keeping both Daniel and Shadow at bay with sweeping arcs of the blade. "You should have minded your own business," Rollins growled. "All I wanted was the dog. No one else had to get hurt." Shadow, limping slightly from the kick, but still alert and aggressive, positioned himself protectively in front of the stairs again. Something had changed in the dog's demeanor, a new intensity, a focused purpose that seemed to transcend his training. His golden eyes never left Rollins, tracking every movement with predatory precision. Daniel, wiping blood from his eye, tried to maneuver to the side, hoping to flank Rollins and provide Shadow with an opening. But the intruder was experienced and wary, keeping both man and dog in his field of vision as he edged toward the stairs. "This ends now," Rollins said, his voice coldly determined. "I'm taking care of the dog, and then we forget this ever happened." "That's not going to happen," Daniel replied, gripping the poker more tightly. "You're not touching my family or Shadow." Rollins laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "You have no idea what you're up against. I've killed before. I won't hesitate to—" The rest of his sentence was cut off by a sound that froze everyone in place, the keening wail of police sirens, rapidly approaching. Relief flooded through Daniel. Help was coming. They just had to hold out a little longer. But the sirens had the opposite effect on Rollins. His face contorted with rage and desperation. "No!" he shouted. "I'm not going back to prison!" With shocking speed, he lunged toward the stairs, knife extended. Daniel moved to intercept, but was too far away. Shadow was the only barrier between Rollins and the stairs leading to Liam and Eleanor. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Shadow launched himself at Rollins, not in a direct attack, but in a precisely timed leap that placed his body directly in the path of the knife. The blade sank deep into the dog's shoulder instead of finding its way upstairs to Liam and Eleanor. Rollins cursed, trying to free his knife from the dog's flesh. Shadow, despite the grievous wound, did not retreat. Instead, with a strength that seemed beyond his physical capabilities, he surged forward, driving Rollins backward until the man crashed into the wall. Daniel rushed forward, swinging the poker with all his might at Rollins' knife hand. There was a sickening crack as the heavy iron connected with bone. Rollins screamed, the knife clattering to the floor from fingers that could no longer grip it. Shadow, blood flowing freely from his shoulder, maintained his position, pinning Rollins against the wall with the weight of his body. The dog's eyes were alight with an almost supernatural intensity, a furious purpose that transcended simple animal instinct. In that moment, Daniel saw something in Shadow that he couldn't explain, an echo of someone else, a human presence or memory flickering behind those canine eyes. It lasted only an instant, but Daniel was certain he had glimpsed something extraordinary. The front door burst open again, this time filled with uniformed police officers, weapons drawn. "Police! Freeze!" Daniel immediately stepped back, dropping the poker and raising his hands. "He's the intruder!" he called, pointing at Rollins. "Victor Rollins! He broke in trying to kill our dog." Shadow, as if understanding that help had arrived, finally backed away from Rollins, though he maintained a watchful position, his golden eyes never leaving the intruder despite the blood still flowing from his wound. Two officers quickly secured Rollins, who had slumped to the floor, cradling his broken hand and glaring with undisguised hatred at Shadow. More officers spread through the house, securing the scene and calling for medical assistance. "My wife and son are upstairs in the bathroom," Daniel told the officer who approached him, "and our dog needs immediate veterinary attention. He's been stabbed." The officer nodded, calling into his radio for an animal emergency service while another officer went upstairs to check on Eleanor and Liam. Daniel knelt beside Shadow, gently examining the wound. It was deep, and blood was soaking the dog's fur at an alarming rate. "Hang on, boy," he whispered, pressing a clean dish towel against the wound to slow the bleeding. "Help is coming. You did it. You protected us." Shadow whined softly, leaning against Daniel's leg. Despite the pain he must have been in, the dog's eyes remained alert, continually checking the surroundings, making sure the threat was truly contained. Footsteps on the stairs announced Eleanor and Liam's descent, escorted by a female police officer. The moment Liam saw Shadow, he broke free and ran to the injured dog, tears streaming down his face. "Shadow!" he cried, dropping to his knees beside the German shepherd. "You're hurt!" Eleanor gasped when she saw the amount of blood. "We need a vet now," she insisted to the nearest officer. "Please, he's losing too much blood." The officer assured her that animal emergency services were on their way. Meanwhile, Rollins was being led out in handcuffs, still cursing and threatening. As he passed Shadow, the dog growled, a deep rumbling sound that made several officers step back instinctively. Liam, seemingly oblivious to the chaos around him, placed his small hands on Shadow's head, whispering something that only the dog could hear. To everyone's surprise, Shadow seemed to calm under the boy's touch, his breathing becoming more regular despite the severity of his wound. "Don't go," Liam whispered, pressing his forehead against Shadow's. "Please don't go. You're my best friend." A hush fell over the room. Even the police officers seemed to sense that something profound was happening between the boy and the dog. Shadow's eyes, dulled with pain, fixed on Liam's face with an intensity that transcended normal animal awareness. Then, almost imperceptibly at first, Shadow's tail moved. Just once, a weak thump against the hardwood floor. Then again, stronger. Eleanor knelt beside her son, one arm around his shoulders. "He's fighting, Liam. He's strong." The next hour passed in a blur of activity. Emergency veterinary technicians arrived and stabilized Shadow for transport. Police officers took statements from Daniel and Eleanor, documenting Rollins' break-in and attack. Crime scene investigators photographed and collected evidence, including the knife that had wounded Shadow and nearly threatened their family. Throughout it all, Liam refused to leave Shadow's side, holding the dog's paw even as the veterinary technicians worked. Only when they absolutely had to move Shadow to the transport vehicle did Liam finally let go, and even then, he insisted on riding in the car directly behind the animal ambulance. At the emergency veterinary hospital, they were met by Dr. Reyes, who had been called in specifically for Shadow. She took one look at the wound and immediately rushed him into surgery, promising to do everything possible to save him. The waiting room became their world for the next several hours. Police officers came and went, providing updates on Rollins. He was in custody, charged not only with breaking and entering an assault, but also, based on evidence found in his car, with the murder of Caleb Weston. The dog tags Daniel had been carrying, along with their statements about Shadow witnessing the murder, had provided the connection the police needed. As night fell, Liam finally succumbed to exhaustion, falling asleep on Eleanor's lap. Daniel, his own wounds treated by paramedics, sat beside them, his hand resting protectively on his son's back. "Do you think Shadow will make it?" Eleanor whispered, stroking Liam's hair. Daniel wanted to offer reassurance, but the image of Shadow's blood pooling on their floor was still vivid in his mind. "I don't know," he admitted. "The wound was deep. But if any dog could survive this, it's him." "There was something different about him during the fight," Eleanor said hesitantly. "Something more than just a trained dog?" Daniel nodded, relieved that he hadn't been the only one to notice. "I saw it too. When he had Rollins pinned against the wall, there was something in his eyes, something almost human." They fell into silence, both contemplating the extraordinary events that had brought Shadow into their lives and the mysteries that still surrounded him. Outside the waiting room windows, snow had begun to fall again, gentle flakes that bore no resemblance to the violent storm that had first brought the dog to their doorstep. It was nearly midnight when Dr. Reyes finally emerged from the surgical area, still wearing her scrubs, looking exhausted but cautiously optimistic. "He's stable," she announced, and both parents let out breaths they hadn't realized they were holding. The knife missed his vital organs by millimeters. It's almost as if he knew exactly how to position himself to avoid a fatal wound. "Can we see him?" Daniel asked. Dr. Reyes hesitated. "He's heavily sedated and will be for some time. You should all go home and get some rest. Come back in the morning." But one look at Liam, who had awakened at the sound of the doctor's voice and was now watching with pleading eyes, changed her mind. 5 minutes, she conceded with a small smile. "Just to see that he's okay, then home for all of you." They followed her through swinging doors into a recovery area where Shadow lay on a padded table, IVs running into his leg, his body wrapped in bandages. Despite the sedation, his eyes opened when they entered, focusing immediately on Liam. The boy approached slowly, reaching out a tentative hand to touch Shadow's paw. "Is he going to be okay?" he asked Dr. Reyes. "It looks that way," she confirmed. "He's young, strong, and has clearly been through worse. Military dogs are incredibly resilient." Shadow's tail thumped weakly against the table at the sound of Liam's voice, his eyes never leaving the boy despite the heavy sedation. "You saved us," Liam whispered to the dog, "just like you tried to save Caleb." At the mention of his former owner's name, a visible change came over Shadow. His ears perked slightly and a soft whine escaped him. "He remembers," Eleanor murmured, amazed at the dog's response despite his condition. Dr. Reyes watched with professional interest. The bond between military handlers and their dogs is extraordinary. Shadow clearly formed a similar attachment to your son in a remarkably short time. "It's more than that," Daniel said quietly. "There's something special about their connection, something we can't fully explain." The veterinarian nodded thoughtfully. "I've worked with many service animals over the years. Sometimes there are bonds that go beyond our understanding, connections that seem almost supernatural." She smiled slightly. "Or maybe it's just the purest form of love, which is miraculous enough on its own." Their 5 minutes stretched to 10, as no one had the heart to separate Liam from Shadow, who seemed to draw strength from the boy's presence. Eventually, though, Dr. Reyes insisted they leave to allow Shadow the rest he needed to heal. "I promise he'll be here in the morning," she assured Liam, who reluctantly allowed himself to be led away. And a little better every day. The next week passed in a blur of police interviews, visits to the veterinary hospital, and slow healing, both for Shadow and for the family's sense of security. Rollins' arrest made the local news, especially when it was revealed that evidence from his car directly linked him to Caleb Weston's murder. The article mentioned a service dog that had gone missing after the murder and was later found by a local family. But their names were kept out of the press at the police department's recommendation. Shadow made remarkable progress, recovering faster than Dr. Reyes had predicted. By the 4th day, he was able to stand and walk short distances. By the 7th, he was cleared to go home, though with strict instructions for continued rest and medication. The day they brought Shadow home was bright and clear, the snow from the earlier storms beginning to melt in the winter sunshine. Their house had been repaired, the broken door replaced, the damaged furniture removed, new locks installed on all entrances. It looked normal again, though none of them would ever see it quite the same way. Shadow walked carefully into the house, his shoulders still bandaged, but his eyes alert and watchful as ever. He made a slow circuit of the main floor, as if checking for threats, before finally settling in the living room where Liam had arranged a special bed for him beside the couch. "Welcome home, Shadow," Liam said, sitting cross-legged beside the dog. "This is your home now, forever." Eleanor and Daniel, watching from the doorway, exchanged glances. They had discussed this extensively over the past week. What would happen to Shadow now that Rollins was in custody and the immediate danger had passed? "We need to talk about something," Daniel said, joining Liam beside Shadow. Eleanor followed, sitting on the couch nearby. "About Shadow's future." Liam's face immediately clouded with worry. "He's staying with us. You promised." "We did," Eleanor confirmed gently. "And we meant it. But there's something we need to consider." She took a deep breath. Shadow belonged to Caleb Weston, who has family, a sister who lives in Colorado. The police contacted her about everything that happened. Liam's eyes filled with tears. "She wants to take Shadow away?" "Actually, no," Daniel said, smiling slightly at his son's surprise. "She came to visit Shadow at the hospital yesterday while you were at school. She saw how special your bond is with him." "Caleb's sister believes that Shadow has found a new purpose," Eleanor continued, reaching out to stroke the dog's head. "She told us that Caleb would have wanted Shadow to be where he's needed most, with someone who loves him and needs his protection." "Really?" Liam's voice was small, hopeful. "She's not going to take him?" "Really," Daniel confirmed. "She signed all the legal papers. Shadow is officially part of our family now." Liam's face broke into a wide smile, and he threw his arms around Shadow's neck, careful to avoid his injury. "Did you hear that, boy? You're home, forever." Shadow's tail wagged strongly, and he nuzzled against Liam with unmistakable affection. As the days turned into weeks, life gradually returned to a new normal for the Carter family. Shadow's physical wounds healed completely, leaving only a scar beneath his fur to mark where Rollins' knife had struck. The dog's protective instincts remained strong. He still positioned himself between Liam and any perceived threat, still checked the house perimeter before settling down each night, still woke at the slightest unusual sound. But there were other changes too, more subtle ones. Shadow seemed to understand conversations in a way that went beyond normal canine intelligence. He responded to emotions with uncanny perception, offering comfort when needed, space when appropriate. And the bond between him and Liam continued to deepen in ways that sometimes left Eleanor and Daniel in awe. They never spoke publicly about the faceless guardian in the woods, the vanishing cabin, or the telepathic communication. Those experiences remained a private mystery, something they couldn't fully explain, but couldn't deny either. Sometimes, on walks in the woods near their home, Shadow would stop and stare into the deeper forest, ears perked, as if hearing or sensing something beyond human perception. Liam would often stop beside him, his small hand on the dog's back, both of them seemingly communicating with something unseen. Spring came early that year, melting the last of the snow and bringing new life to Winterbrook. As the weather warmed, the Carter family spent more time outdoors, often with Shadow accompanying them everywhere. The German Shepherd had become a neighborhood fixture, admired for his dignified bearing and protective nature. On one particularly beautiful Saturday in early April, they visited the local park. Shadow trotted beside Liam, occasionally running ahead to investigate interesting scents, but always circling back, keeping the boy within his protective radius. Eleanor and Daniel sat on a bench, watching as Liam threw a ball for Shadow in a grassy clearing. The dog moved with fluid grace, his injury completely healed, his strength fully restored. "He's not just a dog, is he?" Eleanor said quietly, putting words to the thought they had both harbored for months. Daniel shook his head. "I don't think so. Not entirely." He watched as Shadow returned the ball to Liam, his golden eyes bright with affection and something deeper, an awareness, an intelligence, a presence that transcended ordinary animal consciousness. "Do you think—" Eleanor hesitated, knowing how strange the question would sound. "Do you think there's something of Caleb in him? Some connection that didn't end with death?" Daniel considered this. They had both seen moments when Shadow seemed to respond to Caleb's name with more than simple recognition, times when the dog's eyes held a depth of understanding that felt almost human. "I don't know," he admitted finally, "but I think whatever Shadow is, whoever he is, he was meant to find us, to find Liam." They fell silent, watching as their son laughed, his small arms wrapped around Shadow's neck in an exuberant hug that the dog accepted with patient affection. The bond between them was beautiful to witness, a connection that had saved their family in more ways than one. As they prepared to head home, Shadow suddenly stopped, his head lifting, ears perked toward the edge of the park where a small wooded area began. Liam followed his gaze, then looked back at his parents with a small, secretive smile. "Shadow says thank you," he called to them, for giving him a home. Eleanor and Daniel exchanged glances, unsure if this was just a child's imagination or something more. But when they looked toward the tree line where Shadow was staring, they both felt a momentary chill, not unpleasant but distinct, a presence, acknowledged and then gone. "You're welcome," Daniel called back, addressing both his son and whatever might be listening beyond ordinary perception. "He's family now." Shadow's tail wagged once, powerfully, and then he turned away from the trees, trotting back to Liam's side where he belonged. Together, they moved toward home, boy and dog, guardian and protected, bound by a connection that transcended the ordinary boundaries between human and animal, life and death, known and unknown. In the quiet moments before sleep that night, with Shadow settled on his bed beside Liam's, Eleanor paused in the doorway of her son's room. The dog's golden eyes met hers in the dimness, watchful and wise. "Good night, Shadow," she whispered. "Thank you for finding us." Shadow's tail thumped against the floor, once, deliberately. In that moment, Eleanor could have sworn she saw something flicker in the dog's eyes. A thank you, a promise, a connection to something beyond. Then it was gone, and he was simply a dog again, albeit an extraordinary one, guarding the child he had claimed as his own. As Eleanor closed the door partway, leaving it open enough for Shadow to come and go, she knew with absolute certainty that their family was safe. Whatever storms life might bring, Shadow would be there, their guardian, their protector, their miracle from the snow. The storm howled outside, but this time they were all safe within. What do you think? Did Shadow have a connection to Caleb beyond death? Have you ever felt a supernatural bond with an animal? Share your own extraordinary pet stories in the comments.